This begins the Points to Ponder video for Chapter 12, the focus of which is marketing and communication. Specifically, we're interested in stakeholder goodwill. Alright, so as the chapter states, the goal of responsible marketing is to help define the vision of a responsible business, to then support the implementation process, and to finally create stakeholder goodwill, which the organization then translates into tangible business benefits. So what exactly is stakeholder goodwill? Well, that is the value that's created for an organization when its stakeholders adopt a positive attitude toward that organization. So we're trying to make sure that our customers think positive thoughts about us, that they think that we're a good business, that they think we're a sustainable, responsible, and ethical business. So how do we achieve this stakeholder goodwill? Well, we do it through the activities of integrated marketing communication. What that does is it serves to craft a multifaceted but still congruently connected message. So the message is consistent about an organization's responsible management performance to all of its various stakeholder groups. So what we want is one vision, one communication. Integrating marketing communication specifically is the process of using an organization's full range of communication and marketing tools, so everything that's in the toolbox, in an interconnected manner. Okay, so this is a thoughtful manner for building stakeholder goodwill. Okay, the bottom line, as we all know, is that effective marketing and communication of social and environmental business performance can really make or break a business. And ideally, we want it to make our business. We want our business to be seen as one, again, that's responsible. So we don't want to be accused of, for example, greenwashing. We know that greenwashing, basically that's the, it looks like we're pretending to focus on sustainability, but we're really not. Or we focus in very limited or superficial ways in an attempt to just get people to buy our product or our service, but we're not really committed to sustainability. That's not what we want. We don't want to be that kind of company, and we certainly don't want to be accused of being that kind of company, because those kinds of accusations can really destroy reputations or even the entire business in a relatively short period of time. Basically, they can reveal the imbalance between a company's socio-environmental performance and our communication activities. So we need to be consistent. That which we're actually doing in the organization, we need to be communicating that effectively to all of our key stakeholders. So what is effective responsible management communication? Well, it's essentially like any other effective communication, and it's summed up in 7, I think the book calls them time-tested principles of business communication, and these serve as the basis for effective stakeholder communication. And I don't think you'll be surprised. In fact, I would argue that these are good principles for all communication. All right, number 1, adapt to your audience. What do they need? What are they interested in hearing? What is their language? What is their preferred mode of receiving a message? Second, clarify your purpose. Be as specific as possible with what you're trying to accomplish in your communication. Third, state your message clearly. And again, this compels you to use language that is consistent with the language used by the stakeholder you're trying to reach. Stay on topic. Don't be talking about lots of other things. If you want to talk about a particular product or service, you want to talk about a particular initiative, stay on that topic. Fifth, be complete and accurate. Make sure that everything you're saying in that marketing communication is absolutely truthful and fully communicates what's going on. 6, establish that goodwill. We're trying to build a relationship between our organization and all of the stakeholders that we're reaching out to. And then finally, make sure that we're communicating with credibility. Make sure that, for example, whoever appears in a commercial, if that's the way that we decide to go, is someone who appears to be credible. Make sure that what we're talking about comes across and is, in fact, honest and believable. Effective marketing of responsible management activities depends on the successful integration of responsible management activities into the 4 Ps, the classic. If you've ever taken an introductory marketing course, you have studied the 4 Ps. So it's product, price, place, and promotion. Those together are what's called the marketing mix. And again, this is not specific to responsible management. This is every single introductory management course, every single introductory marketing course that's been taught for at least probably 40 years has talked about the marketing mix and the 4 Ps. So, when we try to apply those 4 Ps to responsible management, what does that actually look like? Figure 12.6 does a really nice job of capturing some of this. So let me highlight a few of these. So, for example, under the P of product, we talk about product innovation by its responsibility features. We talk about and we strive to eliminate products with unacceptable responsible business performance. We want to get rid of anything that isn't actually consistent with our overall vision of responsible business. With respect to place, we want to think about and focus on environmental impact of distribution. You know, how far are we having to ship things? What's the method of the shipment? What is that costing, not only in terms of today's costs, but, for example, cost to the environment. Switching over to price, we talk about in-pricing external effects. So really taking into account all of the costs that might be associated with our product. For example, if we're producing something that ultimately recycling of that product might prove difficult unless we can bring it back into our own operation, well, we should incorporate the costs associated with that and make sure that it's easy for the consumer to return that product to us so that we can, in fact, try to manage any potential environmental impacts. Under promotion, we want to make sure that we're focused on the usage of cause-related marketing as a sales argument. And I want to argue here that we want to especially ensure that when we use this cause-related marketing, that we're being legitimate, that we're being credible, that we're being honest, that we're not trying to make it look as though we're doing something above and beyond selling our product, unless we really are doing something above and beyond selling our product. So we need to always be honest. And what we don't want is for our behaviors to differ from the marketing, the communication of those behaviors. Those things need to be in sync. And with responsible business, we want to be making smart, responsible decisions and then talking about those smart, responsible decisions to relevant stakeholders. Successfully communicating responsible activities requires the usage of specific tools, all right? So the main tools, one of which I just mentioned, is cause-related marketing. Another is social marketing. We've got issues in crisis communication, formal reporting, codes of conduct, and then, of course, mission and vision statements. Each tool serves a different communication purpose. Could be anything from increasing sales to trying to change people's behaviors and also to ensure ethical compliance. So briefly looking at each of these possible tools, the first one, cause-related marketing. This is what Tom's Shoes does. Okay, so most people have heard of Tom's Shoes. Tom's is the organization where you buy a shoe and they donate, or you buy a pair of shoes and they donate a pair of shoes to someone in need in the world. So that's a great example of cause-related marketing. It's the promotion of a product by linking its sales with the contribution to a good cause. Another tool is social marketing. This is an application of traditional marketing techniques that we're using in order to try and cause a behavior change that either benefits the individual who's making the purchase or society at large. So anything that enables us to, for example, more easily recycle, more easily reuse, perhaps the packaging of a product, something along those lines that enables us to create benefits. Issues in crisis communication isn't really specific to responsible management. It's the communication that's used any time that something happens, any situation that threatens the company or its reputation. And in fact, this is something that I think all organizations, it doesn't matter if it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, an educational institution, or a government agency, needs to have a protocol for crisis communication. What happens if? Certainly it's entirely possible that bad things can happen in the production of a product or the delivery of a service, and the organization is going to want to respond quickly to mitigate against any issues. We don't want to end up like Volkswagen, which of course denied that there were any issues with its vehicles, didn't want to do any sort of recall, and now they're in a situation because they did not engage in appropriate crisis communication, because they did not engage in appropriate decision making. Now they're in a situation where the reputation of their firm has been incredibly damaged, perhaps irreparably damaged, and they will not only have lost a tremendous amount of money, but people will lose their jobs. The Volkswagen brand, the Volkswagen reputation has taken a pretty significant hit, and we could be talking about all the way to closing of plants, which, as you know, has a tremendous impact on the communities in which those plants exist. So crisis communication, I can't overstate this enough, has to be handled and handled well. There are, of course, also formal sustainability reports that organizations can elect to complete. These focus typically on the factual. They tend to be concise. They tend to be fairly concise and yet extensive description of what the organization is doing to maintain its sustainable focus. Codes of conduct, these are essentially behavior standards that a company has agreed to that govern how they interact with various stakeholder groups. And then finally, vision and mission statements. Again, this is a great example of a form of communication that certainly isn't specific to responsible management, but if you have an organization that says, hey, you know, we're all about sustainability and we're all about being responsible and we're all about being ethical, then certainly you would expect those ideas, those themes to be reflected both in the vision statement, which remember that's the aspirational statement for the organization, and the mission statement. And the mission statement gets at some key questions: who the organization serves, what it does, and why it all matters. So you would expect to see in both vision and mission statements, again, that focus, that straightforward description of, well, what is this organization doing? What does it purport to do in order to be sustainable, responsible, and ethical? And those statements and the way that they're articulated through the organization's culture are expected to influence employee behavior, which at the end of the day, ultimately, that's really what dictates the extent to which the organization is going to be responsible, sustainable, ethical. It all comes down to the actions of all of the employees, whether they're involved in the production line or in purchasing, in accounts payable, in marketing, in IT, in the C-suite. It doesn't matter. Their actions are what really out front, out in center, you know, that's what tells us whether an organization is in fact responsible, sustainable, and ethical. Now, when we talk about stakeholders as stakeholder communication types, there are three different levels. The higher levels mean that there is higher intensity in the communication activity, higher engagement in the communication activity, more reciprocity in the communication activity. So level 1, the bottom, is stakeholder information. Level 2 is stakeholder response, and level 3 is stakeholder involvement. So the stakeholder information strategy is essentially one-way communication. So the organization is telling key stakeholders whatever it wants to tell them. It's not about trying to listen to what the stakeholders have to say. It's simply, we're going to tell you what's happening within our organization. The stakeholder response strategy, okay, we're moving up in terms of intensity and engagement, is a two-way communication process, which is identified by communication that flows to and from the public and all stakeholders. So the company listens to comments or feedback about its responsible activities and even changes or modifies its activities as a result. Then the stakeholder involvement strategy is a dialogue, a true dialogue or relationship with the stakeholders. So the company and the stakeholders engage in what's called sense making and the co-construction of ideas, activities, and behaviors. So they're working together, and it becomes more difficult, more challenging to find the boundary between the organization and the stakeholders. They are now we're talking about a true symbiosis, a true reciprocity. In order to customize stakeholder communication tools to a specific audience, what organizations need to do is a thorough stakeholder analysis. What that does is it's used to ensure the appropriateness of communications for different stakeholder groups. And remember, there are any number of possible stakeholder groups. You've got employees, you've got end user consumers, you have potentially distributors, suppliers, government agencies, competitors. I mean, there are owners or shareholders, depending on the form of the organization. There are many, many different stakeholder groups, and we know that we need to take care to ensure that we're communicating correctly with each of them. You can't expect that a one-size-fits-all strategy is going to work. It will not do so. So primary stakeholders, these are the ones that your company most wants to develop a relationship with, the folks that we most want to influence, and the ones with whom the company, we need them in order to achieve our goal or our purpose. A secondary stakeholder is one that might read our communication or learn about the information, but they're not the one to whom the original message was directed. Okay, so we're getting a little bit further away. And then an intermediate stakeholder is one that simply forwards the message to others. So for example, the text talks about the media and how they can serve as an intermediate stakeholder. They might be the ones who are announcing the activities that your organization is using to communicate its focus on sustainability or responsibility or ethics to end user consumers, potential investors, and so on. Okay, so as is true with the rest of the chapters, at the end we have what I think is a terrific checklist. This one is focused around responsible marketing and communication, and there are the 3 phases that are described in your text. So the first phase is ensuring effective marketing communication. So the question you can ask is, does our marketing communication with respect to sustainability, does it effectively create messages that promote sustainable development? Second, does it effectively communicate to a broad set of stakeholders? This is with reference to responsibility. And finally, does it avoid misleading impressions of our social and environmental performance? Are we staying away from greenwashing? Phase 2 is all about applying the various marketing communication tools, and so we ask ourselves the question again. Sort of this is our audit of ourselves. Do the marketing communication tools that we apply, do they create social and environmental and economic value? Are they value added, for example? With respect to responsibility, do those communication tools create the maximum overall value for stakeholders that's possible? And finally, do the tools work without causing moral issues? For example, are we sure that our communication isn't being viewed by people who maybe shouldn't be seeing it? Whether that would be, let's say, minors or children. Are we appropriately targeting our communication to the appropriate audience? Are we doing everything we can to ensure that only the appropriate audience has access to or is most likely to see the messaging that we're putting out there? And finally, phase 3 is talking about customizing stakeholder communication. So when we look at the customization of our stakeholder information, does it support the process of co-creation of social, environmental, and economic value? Remember, that's the highest level. That's the most involved level. Does it lead to profound stakeholder involvement, again, or engagement based on a deep understanding? So are we at the point where that line between organization and customer is really blurring? We're really working cooperatively together. We've got that mutual reciprocity happening. And finally, does it help to avoid and mitigate moral issues related to stakeholders? And that brings us to the end of our chapter on responsible marketing.